Welcome back to War Movie Theatre and what I think we should call our autumn season. Now, we've got some news, which is very exciting. First bit of news is that if you want to come and see an episode of War Movie Theatre being recorded live, which I know for so many people has been the dream for so long, now is your chance.
What time are we all coming round to your house, Rob?
Yes, everyone round to mine. We'll watch something downstairs, interrupted by children asking what's going on. My wife saying, hang on, isn't this person dead? No, that was another film, right? No, at the Imperial War Museum on the 1st of November, the Imperial War Museum in London, they are having their podcast festival. And I mean, other podcasts will be recording there as well or having events, but come and watch us. It will be great fun. We are going to be doing 1917, which will be that week's episode. That will kick off I think November for us is going to be World War I month, isn't it, Duncan?
Yeah, we might as well. We haven't done enough World War I films, and if you get invited to the Imperial War Museum, I feel you should probably do a World War I month.
Absolutely. And you can come and tell us which of the 4 different, or however many it is, versions of All Quiet on the Western Front we should be doing, because that's the bit I'm wrestling with at the moment.
And maybe point us to a way to get Gallipoli, the early 80s film, somewhere in the UK, because I've been searching for quite some time.
Well, I've got a DVD of it downstairs, but I don't know how good quality it is.
Excellent.
But yeah, no, but that was not easy to get, actually. So yes, 1st of November at the Imperial War Museum, we will be doing 1917. We will have a special guest. I'm not quite sure if we're ready to say who that is yet, but it will be great fun. It'll be essentially sort of like 1917. We'll record it in one long take. But halfway through, Duncan will hit me over the head with a bit of wood, and I'll fall unconscious. You can book tickets to that via the Imperial War Museum website or at www.iwm.org.uk/events/podcast-live, or just Google it or whatever. That's our first bit of exciting news. Our second bit of not really exciting news is the way that this podcast is sustained, and I think it would be a stretch to say that it makes money, but the way that this podcast does not actively lose money is we take advertising. And as part of our bid to get more advertising money and to better promote it, Acast, who host us, have asked us to get our readers to do a survey about themselves. I would be lying if I said that this was a short survey. It takes about 15 minutes.
But it's at least not too invasive. I mean, they're not asking for biometric information, fingerprints, blood types, etc.
No, they really just want to know what you want advertised at them. And I mean, no one is going to beat the listener in California who gets advertising for sperm donation. So, hello. If you wanted to fill that in, we'd really appreciate it. And the link for the podcast festival as well are in our show notes on whatever platform you listen to this through. But the link for that is also bit.ly/warmovietheatre-survey. I'm really sorry about that. I apologize for every part of this, except that we're going to be live. We're going to be live at the Imperial Museum. Come and watch us. That will be brilliant fun. And maybe by then we will have sorted out merchandising. I think we're going to do merchandise, aren't we?
Definitely for Christmas. We could probably, if we're going to do it for Christmas, we might as well do it for November.
Yeah, right. Exactly. So come and get your signed T-shirts or whatever from us. Somebody has produced T-shirt designs, which are...
I don't think we should talk about those.
I don't think we can talk. They're so extraordinary. All I can say is we're working on it. So thank you for this listening to this short introduction, and now on with the show. Welcome to War Movie Theatre. Somebody once wrote, "Hell is the impossibility of reason." That's what this podcast feels like. This week, we're out on patrol as we do battle with ourselves as well as the enemy, fighting for our souls in the jungles of Vietnam. That's right, we're watching Platoon. I'm Rob Hutton. Back in '65, I believed in this podcast. Now I'm beginning to suspect we've been kicking asses so long, it's time we got ours kicked. After I got out to Vietnam, I met a guy no one really cares about from an end-of-the-line small town you've never heard of, Ashington, Northumberland. He says he likes it out here because you get to do what you want. Now he's picking up his pump action shotgun and heading towards a village that stood for 1,000 years. Hello, Duncan Weldon.
Hello, Rob.
And joining us is a man who's obviously hoping to mine this episode for material he can use in a thinly disguised autobiography. It's Times columnist, Times radio host, and author of new novel Rabbits, Hugo Rifkind.
Hello. I mean, as I've already written 2 thinly disguised autobiographies, I can't possibly write a third, but you never know.
Hugo, you asked to do Platoon.
Yes.
Why?
Because I love it. Because it's, I think I probably saw it at exactly the right point in life when I was about 12. And it defined for me a lot of what I think about, not just about war, but about men and how they relate, about the persistence of evil, the darkness in the human heart, and so on. How you just can't rely on people, how they turn out to be vicious. You mentioned my novel Rabbits, where I go on to, which is a lot of it begins certainly at a boarding school. Very similar experience to being in Vietnam, I would have thought. Very similar levels of moral depravity and savagery and betrayal and sort of heroism at the same time. So no, it was a deeply, deeply informative film to me. But also, I mean, it's the ultimate Vietnam War film, I think, for reasons I will explain if you wish me to, which I'd imagine you do.
No, we will wish you to. That's
yes.
So you saw it when you were 12. Duncan, when do you think you first saw it?
I mean, I think I saw it a little bit later, maybe 14 or 15. Watching it again this weekend was, I think, maybe the 4th or 5th time I've seen it. It's one of those films that, I saw it 14 or 15. We probably watched sort of me and mates 2 or 3 times in the following 3 or 4 years. I saw it once about 20 years ago, but then I hadn't seen it for a long time. And I'm with Hugo. It's a great film. I'd question whether it's the best Vietnam movie, but it is a bloody good film by, any stretch.
I think, I'm slightly older than you guys, so it came out when I was 12. I think I know I saw it for the first time on the black and white TV that I had in my bedroom, and I think I would probably have been about 15 or 16. It would have been when it was shown on TV, and I have the idea that I saw it as a part of the Movie Strand, although I think that's actually not true because I checked and I don't think they broadcast it. And then I definitely saw it. I mean, it was, yeah. I think this is quite a teenage film. I think it's a great film to see when you're a teenager. And I then definitely saw it again at university, sort of on a big screen in the Film Society, because it was one of the ones that they had to play in the mid-90s at a University Film Society. Even more, I think, than Apocalypse Now, which I think now people sort of think is the ultimate kind of student Vietnam film. But I think in 1994, I think it was this. It's a really interesting film, sort of commercially. There's a great podcast called Do We Get to Win This Time by a guy called Brian Raftery, which is a sort of history of Vietnam through the movies. He makes the case quite convincingly that basically up until Platoon, Vietnam films are not very commercial. And this sort of lands in cinemas at just the point at which sort of veterans, it's 10 years after the war's ended, veterans are willing to start talking about it. Teenage audiences crucially are really interested in finding out exactly what was it their dads were doing in Southeast Asia in the 60s. And it wins 4 Oscars. I think it does incredibly well in the 87 Oscars.
Stone's the first veteran to make a film, isn't he?
Yeah, I think so. Yes. And
wins 4 Oscars, nominated for another 4. Wins Best Picture, Best Director. Makes a huge amount of money. Yeah.
Willem Dafoe and Tom Berenger are both nominated for Best Supporting Actor, which is one of those things where you think, right, well, definitely you're going to lose because you're going to split the Vietnam vote.
Well, actually, the fact that it's the 2 of them, when you think about their 2 characters in the film, the fact that they have to come rub up against each other, even for the Oscar, is very, very fitting.
They are warring for the soul of the Academy, but it's sort of absolutely fair because I couldn't pick between them. I think they're both fantastic in it.
Oh, I could. I'd pick Defoe in a heartbeat. Actually, I think.
Yeah.
But
okay.
But yeah, we can come to
that. We can, and you then have this sort of suddenly from a film that when they finished making it, nobody thinks it's going to make any money. One of the actors in it says, look, when we were filming this, the biggest movie full stop of 1986 is Top Gun. And he just thinks that a world in which Top Gun is the biggest film is not going to want to watch Platoon, right? Which is, as it turns out, precisely wrong. So they initially they don't think they can get any. Stone has been trying to make this for a decade. Nobody's interested. It does so well that after that, every studio wants a Vietnam film. and there's, for instance, Hamburger Hill, which has sort of been in production for about the same amount of time and is similarly a passion project. Suddenly, the sort of studios banging down their door saying, we understand you have a Vietnam film in the can. So it's incredibly impactful. But it is this sort of passion project for Oliver Stone, who, do you guys know about his war?
I know a bit about his war, sure. But do you?
Goes out, it's semi-automatic. He did not, he says, shoot his sergeant. Well,
he would say that, wouldn't he? Where's the sergeant now, Rob?
But this is based on it is in much the same way that well, actually, I've just finished Hugo's excellent Rabbits, which I suspect that Hugo did not, in fact, witness a murder. Did you witness a murder at school?
I've said all I wish to say about that in the novel.
Right.
No, I can understand. It's the using of an environment, the using of an experience in order to craft a narrative about it. I don't think it's quite the narrative that he initially intended to craft about it. I think the film he wanted to make, reading between the lines, the film he wanted to make was going to be a lot more druggy, a lot more alternative. You know about the Jim Morrison connection.
He tried to get his first draft. He sent the script to Morrison, didn't he? It was found when he died, yeah.
But it was found with Morrison when he died. The film originally was going to have a soundtrack that was entirely films by the Doors. And I think he wanted Morrison to basically play the lead, to play the Charlie Sheen character, which makes it a much more kind of countercultural film than it ended up being, which I think is interesting.
Yeah.
It's funny you mentioned the counterculture, because I think it's a wonderful, wonderful film, but it's really interesting because it's got all of the, not as much as he wanted, but it's got all of the druggy bits. It's got all of the sort of moral ambiguities and all of that. But also, it's a film which, when I was watching it as a teenager, sort of fits with Rambo and Predator as a sort of 80s action movie at times as well. And it's weird to find a film which does both. That sort of big Hollywood explosions, firefight, and also has that much deeper layer to it.
Can I make the case for it being the ultimate Nam film, even though that's not necessarily not necessarily the same thing as it being the best Nam film, but certainly the ultimate one, and in a way that frankly I wouldn't have got. I certainly didn't get at 12, and I wouldn't have got at 16. So on a level, it's the epitome of that brilliant Frankie Boyle observation that the worst thing about America invading your country is that they come back a decade or two later and make a film about how sad it made them. Because it is absolutely that. The fact that it was made in the 80s, it's made in 1986, right? 1986. It's a new generation of Vietnam film. You can see it's a new generation. In a very simple way. First up, that it stars Charlie Sheen. It's only 7 years after Martin Sheen was in Apocalypse Now, which is a whole different generation of filmmaking, and a whole different generation of understanding of the Vietnam War. I think you're right that it does today sort of lack the prestige of those 70s Vietnam films. Apocalypse Now, Deer Hunter, I think it was Deer Hunter was 78.
Deer Hunter 70s.
But it also, weirdly enough, I think lacks the prestige of, say, Full Metal Jacket, which was a year later, which I don't think is a great film, although we can have a fight about that if you want. But what it does that neither Apocalypse Now and The Deer Hunter, which are both, I think, amazing films, it does something that neither of them have the balls to do, which is it looks at Vietnam and it says the problem was America, right? It doesn't say the problem was mankind and the darkness in the human soul. It doesn't have its monsters as the Viet Cong. The Viet Cong are frankly barely in it. The monsters here are Americans. This is about America. This is about America going wrong. This is about America not being who it thought it was. This is about America being the bad guy. Which the fact, when you consider how incredibly successful it was, how incredibly well it did, I think just was sort of quite a brave and certainly slightly revolutionary thing to do at the time. But is also how we understand, how popular culture, at any rate, understands the Vietnam War now. It's not like Apocalypse Now. It's not like The Deer Hunter. It's absolutely that Platoon. America went mad and disgraced itself, and that's what this film is.
The anti Top Gun, to go back to the other film of 1986.
Well, and it did, and he made it in large part. He was motivated by wanting to make an anti-Green Berets.
Yes. Yeah, which is, at some point we'll have to do the Green Berets, although I've only ever seen the last 10 minutes of it, because actually it turns out that film really radicalized a generation of filmmakers. But yeah, Stone wins the Bronze Star. He does go as a volunteer. He does drop out of Yale, go as a volunteer in the infantry as a private, just like Chris Hale does in the film. His father, it turned out, because his father is reasonably powerful and influential, tried to get him transferred away from combat, and Stone refused.
Right.
And I think he does extra. Does he do 2.5 tours? Because he's there for about 13 months or something. I mean, he's properly in it. He gets a Purple Heart. He has 2 Purple Hearts and was wounded the 3rd time and wins the Bronze Star. You know, he's got the chops and comes back, and through the GI Bill, he can go to college and learn filmmaking. And this is actually, I think this is the first film he writes.
Yes.
But
he gets a lot of his future career comes on the basis of having written this script. It's because he's written this script that he gets to write, for example, Midnight Express. And yeah, so although he's written the script, he just can't get it made for really quite a long time.
Because they just think that people, I mean, I think it's probably true that they just think no one wants to see this. No one, you know, I don't think that anyone in Hollywood who's looking at the making of Apocalypse Now would have thought, oh yeah, that's the game we want to get into.
Yeah. Well,
and they film in the Philippines as well, don't they? Like they did with Apocalypse Now.
Like they did with Apocalypse Now.
Well, and it almost goes even more wrong. I mean, you know, I'm sure you know about this, but because they film in the Philippines. I mean, so there's 2 reasons why they film in the Philippines. One is obviously, like as with Apocalypse Now, it looks quite a lot like Vietnam. But it's also because the Pentagon won't have anything to do with it because they think it's an anti-war film. And the Philippines has all this great military kit that it's been given by the United States post-Vietnam War. So they've got all the right stuff there. So it's like, well, amazing, this will work. And it goes badly wrong, basically nearly goes badly wrong, because literally the week they're due to start filming, Ferdinand Marcos is overthrown in the Philippines. So you've got, I mean, there's, you know, it's the sort of the history relates. You've got some of the cast are already on location. People like William Dafoe is already there, basically phoning back to Oliver Stone going, it's getting a bit edgy on the streets out here, boss. And you've also got Stone speaking to the Philippine military, saying, well, we're ready to start filming. Can you deliver all that kit? And they're like, well, we might sort of need that because we've got a revolution happening. and I mean, eventually, you know, the revolution is sort of bloodless. There's this amazing quote from Oliver Stone, which is sort of so perfect. Oliver Stone is this sort of great figure of, you know, this tireless critic of American chauvinism in the world, you know, who says, I think he said this to Entertainment Weekly. He said, I was happy for the people in the Philippines, but it really threatened our shoot. Which is like, I know you're working for generational freedom here, but God damn it, we're making a movie, which is just so both extreme Oliver Stone and anti-Oliver Stone at the same time that I just absolutely love it.
He's getting, because the cast are very young for this. I mean, not all of them, but a lot of them are very young. And so apparently he's getting phone calls from their parents saying, is it, Mr. Say, is it really safe for my boy to be out there in the middle of this? Especially because you can imagine what sort of the basic American attitude to abroad being, you know, that London isn't safe, that the sort of and you can see news reports that there's a revolution.
Just to come back to Hugo's point on being the best Vietnam film, I'm not sure I agree. I mean, Full Metal Jacket I love. I agree that Full Metal Jacket is, the flaw with Full Metal Jacket is it is 2 excellent films which run back to back.
That's
and
one
don't
flaw.
necessarily.
The other flaw is that it's not filmed in the Philippines, but in fact filmed in London's Docklands, which look,
no revolutions there,
all like Vietnam.
But in terms of sort of great Vietnam art, when I was watching this, like I said, it's the first time I've watched it in 20 years. I was thinking of a novel which I read a couple of years ago. There's a novel called Matterhorn. I don't know if anyone's read it. So Karl Malates, who, if you've seen the great Ken Burns Vietnam War documentary, all 20 hours of it. Malates is one of the talking heads that pops up a lot and is very, very articulate. Marine officer, several tours in Vietnam, and then went to Yale and then was a Rhodes Scholar in Oxford afterwards. And he wrote a novel called Matterhorn, which was published about 10 years ago. And, you know, the inscription to the book says, you know, he's been, dedication says, you know, he spent 30 years writing it and rewriting it, essentially. Sort of his way of processing what happened. But it's sort of a fictionalized account of his time in Vietnam. It's fascinating to watch Platoon having read it because so much of it is very, very familiar, right down to sort of the drug use, of the cultural divides, the racial divides between the soldiers, how a young officer copes with these very experienced NCOs, the kind of things they're doing, the war effort. I highly recommend Matterhorn as a novel. And it's just fascinating that, you know, Malates' take sort of 40 years after the war is so similar to Stone's, you know, 10 years afterwards.
I mean, going back, the one set of parents who are not terribly worried about, or have different set of worries about the Philippines, are Charlie Sheen's parents. His mum packs for him when he goes off because she knows what he needs. Because they'd all been out on this hellish shoot of Apocalypse Now. So she's like, right, you'll need.
You're gonna need a mosquito net. Yeah.
At the very least. Have you? And when they do finally all get out there, are you guys aware of Dale Dye?
Yes, sure. He's like the military trainer guy who makes them all. He basically puts them all through hell for 30 days in the jungle, right?
Yes. So slightly treading on a future category here, but Dale Dye, who plays the captain in this that you see towards the end, he's a Marine who's served in Vietnam and has got out of the Marines, and actually he not only does he appear in an awful lot of Vietnam movies after this, but he is a character in Full Metal Jacket, although not named. They're because the guy who wrote Full Metal Jacket was an army reporter, which was what Dale Dye had, or a Marine Corps reporter, which is what Dale Dye had been doing. So he features him, and he gets out and is sick of the way that they always get soldiers wrong in Hollywood, and sort of decides he can go and he can teach them how to do it. And he's sort of failing to get anyone to listen to him. But he meets Stone, and because Stone has been a soldier and also agrees that Hollywood always gets soldiers wrong, Stone says, "Oh no, we can make this work." So Stone.
Well, this is the other thing that, this film's made in the mid-'80s with very young actors, and they are sort of the first generation of post-national service American actors. America only goes fully volunteer in 73 or 74. So a high proportion of your Hollywood actors until that point will have done at least a year, even if it's just a year in a reserve corps, so they're not eligible for a draft.
So he gets them. They're going to send them all away for 2 weeks boot camp, and they think, oh well, this is going to be sort of staying in a hotel and learning how to hold a weapon and this kind of thing. And they get there, and at some point on the first day, they realize that they're not going back to their hotel. And Dye makes them. They're all referred to by their characters' names and their characters' rank throughout, and they all have to sort of behave in rank order and so on. And Dye just tortures them for 2 weeks. It makes them dig whole dugout, combat holes, this kind of thing. Only lets them sleep for 2 hours at a time. Wakes them up every night, setting off explosives around them. At one point, Oliver Stone creeps up at 3 o'clock in the morning to storm their camp.
I bet he did that on all of his shoots, regardless of it.
Well, wait, I mean, we'll come to Oliver Stone. And they all talk about this as this incredible experience. And I mean, some people dropped out because it was so mad. Forrest Whitaker nearly chops his own fingers off with his machete trying to open a coconut. Willem Dafoe poisons himself drinking water from a stream. There's some concern that he might die. But they're all, the whole time, when they're not drinking poisoned water from a stream, they're eating meals ready to eat, which is the sort of the what are issued to soldiers, which constipate you.
Well, they say it's meant to be three lies in one phrase, meals ready to eat. They say, yeah.
And they're all walking around constipated for the first 4 days.
You could sell that as an experience. You could sell that as an experience on Instagram now as like a fitness boot camp, and people would pay you money.
The weird thing is listening to them talk about it. They're all slightly nostalgic. For, in that kind of 30 years ago, this was, and it probably was a terrific, if you for an actor, it does sound like a terrific experience, a sort of horrible, but they all sort of finish this. They're going slightly mad doing this, and when it finishes the last night, they're handed moonshine, and they all get horribly drunk on some sort of Filipino liquor made out of petrol and coconuts or whatever, and the next morning, they think, well, all we have to do is get back to the hotel. Finally, we're going to go and get some sleep. And they say, no, we just want you we're going to film you making your way back. And the opening scene in the film, after the bit where they get off the plane, you see them making their way through the jungle. That is them coming back from the boot camp with stinking hangovers.
This is when he's covered in ants.
Yeah, and all of that,
yeah.
and he collapses, and Elias has to take his books and so on. All of that is with apparently sort of filmed. And the reason they look like this is because not only have they just had this hellish 2 weeks, and not only have they all got horrible rotten headaches, but they're realizing what making a film with Oliver Stone is going to be like, which is it's going to be like this throughout. And he just sort of Tom Berenger talks about sort of Stone being in a swimming pool one day when he wasn't due to shoot, and Stone turning up and saying, "What are you doing here? You should come and watch. Come and be supportive." And so Berenger turns up and is standing behind the camera, and Stone turns around and says, "What are you doing here? You're putting them off." And he's a kind of director who sits there sort of saying, "This is bullshit," every time after your performance. So it sort of all of them have different. Oliver Stone was horrible to me, and I sat there for 2 days because they're all young actors on their first film, more or less. Sat there for 2 days thinking I was going to get fired. Absolutely, sort of. I mean, it's no making a Vietnam film is going to be as bad as Apocalypse Now. And he didn't have the budget. He didn't have the budget, but he did what he could. They also shoot in order, which has we've done other films like this, and when you've been killed, you get sent home. And so the people who are working on it have this odd experience. It's sort of the first few nights in the hotel bar, it's all incredibly sort of jolly, and they're all wandering into the bar in their fatigues and covered in fake blood and just exhausted and desperate for a drink. And as the weeks go on, the numbers dwindle, and it again it becomes sort of quite psychologically disturbing. And one guy describes, I can't remember, the actor describes sort of having been, as it were, killed and going home and seeing someone in the bar and going over to sort of say goodbye. And the guy doesn't even turn around and says, "If you go and go." So, with that, let's go to the after action report. Quick, Dad, they're on the cable car. What is the moment you call other people in for? I mean, or you want to be called in?
Well, it's difficult, this. I mean, there's a few essential moments in the film. Most of them are pretty unpleasant. I mean, the killing in the village, before the killing, or the first killing in the village, is the sort of, I mean, it's the pivotal moment of the film, right? So you sort of, when you know it's coming, you sit there braced for it. I would say the sort of the dramatic peak of the film, though, is the fight between Barnes and Taylor in the barracks.
Yeah,
when he pulls the knife and cuts his cheek. That's the moment, I would say.
But I think you want to be in before that, because I think you want to be in. So you've got all the setup. I mean, everything on this film is incredibly well done. If I had to just jump forward a little bit, I'd be called into when you first got sort of Elias Defoe and sort of the circle of like the weed smokers, the heads, in the AIDS section. I think that is not a bad jumping off point if you're going to cut out, 15 minutes in, 20 minutes in.
I mean, the weed smoke down the gun barrel. Yeah.
The night patrol, freezing in contact with enemy, all that's really good. Yeah. But the two factions in the base and the sort of we don't smoke marijuana. Yeah. And I mean, actually, one of the ways that this film has affected me for years is the sort of in my mind, I've always had a division between people who smoke dope and people who drink beer, which I get entirely from this. There's dope smokers and there's beer drinkers, and I've always slightly resented this film because I'm a beer drinker.
Yeah, I feel like we're slightly coming back to my novel here, aren't we?
Yeah, I feel this film isn't fair to sort of to beer drinkers. We get a bad rap.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think that is a fair criticism on behalf of the beer drinkers, on behalf of the non-dope smokers. I think they are portrayed as the nasty Philistines, the nasty murderous Philistines. That's absolutely true, which is only sometimes true in real life. Yeah, drugs are definitely cool in this film.
I mean, there's one of the reasons the Department of Defense didn't cooperate. I did so many. They saw the script is the reason they didn't cooperate. But they said there were no racial tensions, which, I mean, looking at America now, I can completely, no. Mm-hmm. There were no racial tensions. Nobody in the army was using drugs. And it's wrong to suggest that the US Army killed civilians.
See, Rob, that's why you don't trust the beer drinkers, right? That's the kind of shit they try and pull afterwards.
It's like, I think, by 1986, we kind of knew, that there'd been a little bit of civilian killing.
I mean, Well, so it's something. I mean, maybe this isn't the precise point to mention it, but the attack in the village, which I think is so basically when they, the people they raid the village that stood for 1,000 years, etc., etc. The two people get killed, arguably 3 people get killed. What's fascinating about that in a sort of filmmaking Oliver Stone kind of way is you would think pretty directly inspired by the My Lai massacre. Right?
Yeah.
That is the My Lai massacre of 1968.
It happens
American
at pretty
soldiers.
much the time that this thing is supposed to be happening as well.
Yeah, pretty much the time, pretty much the place. In 1968 it happens. American soldiers killed hundreds of villagers, raped hundreds of villagers. It was stopped by a very brave airline pilot, more or less stopped, then gave evidence. There was all kinds of stuff about trying to hold them to account and so on. So what you've got here, which I think just is fascinating in terms of the psychology of Oliver Stone, and what he was and wasn't prepared to do. It's a kind of dramatization of the My Lai massacre, and it will be recognized as such. And yet, in the real My Lai massacre, as I said, hundreds were killed, hundreds were raped. Here, maybe 3 are killed, perhaps 1 is raped. He's pulling his punches while wanting to make this point. You think about the film he could have made if he'd done the My Lai massacre as it was done, the horror of that film, the damnation of America of that film. And Oliver Stone, even being Oliver Stone, did not want to do that with this film, which I just think is fascinating.
It's interesting what he does with Taylor in this film with Charlie Sheen's character, because you see Charlie Sheen going right. Very strictly. Sheen should face a court-martial for the things that he does in this film. Shooting near a civilian.
Well, he also kills his sergeant, which is probably frowned upon
later.
At
yes, yeah,
that's definitely something that's frowned upon.
I was say, moral excuse perhaps, but I do believe the military frowns upon such things. Yeah,
I mean, in this scene, you see him, and he's for that bit, he is not a sympathy. Well, is he a sympathy?
He goes beyond the edge. He goes beyond the edge. Yeah, and actually, of those deaths in the village, the one that results from that. When you have the Kevin Dillon character, what's his name? Bunny.
Bunny.
Bunny, who kills the guy with his rifle butt. Even though you don't explicitly see that, it's very slightly off camera. That is the film's most horrifying death, I would say.
I think so. Yes.
Yeah.
And you've got O'Neill, the sergeant, say, nobody saw anything. We're just, and he knows. I mean, all of that. I think that. I would want to be in from sort of the bunker hunt and the village, because I think the village is the emotional heart.
I've often thought it's a slight flaw in the film but the film ends up being centered around the woman Barnes shoots, the old lady shot by Barnes, and that is the murder. That is the murder that there needs to be a court-martial from. That is the sin that needs to be avenged. There has been this other one, much more horrific, that has just happened. And it kind of gets forgotten about. There's no suggestion that Taylor himself should be giving evidence of a court-martial of, this other person who's had their brains bashed out. It's just sort of slightly, this is a less plot-relevant death thing happening there, which I've always been slightly uncomfortable with, just in sort of dramatic terms.
Yeah, that's true. Because, he ought to, if it were Fortunes of War, as it were, the Michael J. Fox film that deals with a Vietnam War crime, he would be the private giving evidence, whereas it's sort of, and indeed any of them could go and give evidence for what Barnes has done, because they all saw it.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be Willem Dafoe that's putting a report in.
But the fact that Taylor doesn't even say to Elias, he did shoot that woman. But also, this other thing happened a few moments before, which was just as bad. That just sort of doesn't come up.
And by the way, Bunny, much more than, in a sense, Barnes is Barnes is a war criminal. Let's be clear, but he's sort of under control.
Bunny's a psychopath. Yeah,
I think we should be clear that Bunny, Bunny, if left alone, will kill and kill again. And in terms of people you actually ought to get off the battlefield,
yes. He ranks high, yes,
but
bad end that man just as well.
The village. You've got Taylor losing it. You've got Bunny. You've got the complete collapse of command. You've got I think the LT is a really interesting character in this, because he all the way through you get that this is a man who is technically in command but has no authority with his his captain, there's a sarcastic remark about whether he's having compass trouble again. His NCOs don't respect him. The men
He's responsible
don't
for
respect
shelling his own troops at one point.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Whoops. Yeah. Yeah.
And also, in this moment where you need justice, he can't deliver it. Elias comes in as this I think there are things about this film that sort of viscerally, one of the reasons I think it's a really great film, and a film that really people do enjoy. You get this sort of desire for justice, and then you get Elias as this figure of righteousness who is going to, who is going to give it. And he is the man who will stand up, and he can't be bought and he can't be bent and all of that kind of thing, though as it turns out he can be shot. But
even that takes a while, to be fair.
Yeah. So all of that scene is fantastic. I mean, you sort of, from then on, right, you've got the artillery strike, you've got all of that going horribly wrong. At that point, you've got this great shot of Barnes marching through the battlefield while everyone else is sort of lying on the floor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Barnes is just striding through it. And so what it reminded me of is Paths of Glory.
Right.
And the opening shot, which is a Stone favourite, and the opening shot of Kirk Douglas walking through the trench. That's slightly different because they're not under fire, but this is just a sense of sort of I am reality. These things can't hurt me. The bullets can't hurt me. Artillery can't hurt me. And he is a different kind of righteous fury because he's furious with his commander who's getting his men killed. Then you've got this other interesting bit that I've always been, I don't know if troubled is quite the word, but Elias the happy warrior.
Right.
Because you've had all this stuff, the sort of hippie Elias and, Elias who thinks maybe America's in the wrong, not really sure why they're there. And then you've just got this bit where he's running through the jungle, just sort of killing people left and right. And
well, like a Labrador having a really good time in a field.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's true. Yeah.
And I've always thought, and at one level it's like, he has to be a brilliant soldier for this film to work, for him to be a sergeant. He can't be a hippie, he has to be a hippie who kills people. But it's incredibly well done. The sort of, you've got these sort of stealthy Vietnamese, and then bang, 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 and they're all dead, and Elias runs across the screen. You go, okay, and then you've got his death,
which I'm sure we will be coming back to.
I think we will be coming back to that in a future category. We've got Barnes in the bunker, I am reality, all of that. That's that's why I would put. That's what I would offer up as my Tom Berenger. This is the one that they play at the Oscars.
Yeah, sure.
Sort of scene where apparently the script had him walking into the bunker, and it was his idea that he should just be there. This sort of thing where they're all talking about whether or not they're going to kill him, and then you hear his voice and you see him just sat there, and it's like.
Yeah, that is. That is a kind of awkward moment, I suppose, isn't it? Yeah.
Just so much more terrifying than enter Barnes. It's just like present Barnes. That's and then the final battle, which is which, as you say, is interestingly a complete almost. You could put that on the end of a Rambo film or something.
Absolutely, you could.
And down to the fact that Taylor has become a killing machine.
Yes. Well, it's something has clicked, and it's very well done. He does it very. He's not just become a killing machine. He's become Elias. He's not as happy. He's a sad dog rather than a happy dog. But actually, the way he moves, the way he, I sort of wondered if it was a conscious echo of that. The way he shed his pack, he's running and shooting at the same time. It's only really him and Elias you quite see move like that and behave in the same kind of way. And you almost, I don't know, you almost wonder if something, it's like something from Elias has passed to him, that he has become that thing,
Yeah. And yes, so I think call me for the bunkers. They've got to the bunkers. Time to put down what you're doing and come in. She's not so dumb. There are women in this film.
I think 3.
Yeah.
One of them gets shot. One of them gets raped. The other one just shouts a lot and very nearly gets killed, but doesn't.
And sees her son get killed. I think
sees her son get killed. There may be others that I missed. I don't think so.
That's bait. It's not. It's and actually So have either of you seen Heaven and Earth?
No, but I know about it. I think it's fascinating that obviously it was made to counter the very obvious criticism of this film that there are no Vietnamese people in it. Right?
So that's the third film in the Stones Vietnam trilogy, and I may be the only person who's seen it because I'd reviewed it for the student paper, and I don't think I would have gone to see it had I not, been reviewing it. And that is based on a true story, and the woman whose story it is, when Platoon came out, she stood outside theatres saying, "Look, it's all very well that you're upset about, the thousands of Americans who died, but I would like you to give some thought to the millions of Vietnamese people who died." And which is, I think, the criticism of this film.
I mean, it's not a criticism only of this film. There are plenty of war films where the enemy don't appear except as a sort of faceless, nameless enemy. But it sort of comes back to that Frankie Boyle thing, that it's like, I mean, and it sort of looks worse when it's Vietnam rather than Germany. I should say I watched this film, and indeed I'm recording this having recently just come back from Vietnam,
which is what we want all our contributors to do. Is watch the film in the country where it's set.
Yes. And it's very interesting. I mean, because Vietnam's it's always been a fascinating country. It's a particularly fascinating country at the moment because it's sort of coming out of communism and becoming a much more open society than it's been for quite a long time. When you engage it at any level with the Vietnam War history there, what's fascinating is your first interpretation of all of it, everything from the museum at the Hanoi Hilton and so on, is the propaganda here is pretty shameless. It's all about like American soldiers having a jolly time and Christmas trees, and they were like evil John McCain was here after he bombed people. No mention of the fact that he spent the rest of the war being tortured in the jungle. None of that. So it's pretty relentless propaganda. But then, of course, your next thought is, well, it is relentless propaganda, but also what I'm used to is equally relentless propaganda from the other side. And the marginalization of the Vietnamese experience of the Vietnam War, which is so heavy through all Vietnam films, to the extent that, weirdly enough, Good Morning Vietnam is one of the few films that actually doesn't do that actually has real Vietnamese people having borderline real Vietnamese experiences. I mean, in a very sort of Hollywood kind of way. There's no interest in this film in the experience of the Vietnamese. None whatsoever. It's 100% not the point.
I this is my slightly, again, my problem with Platoon, though, love it though I do, is it's in the final line. We fought ourselves and the enemy was in us. Well,
kinda.
Yes, you did also.
But that's the case in every Vietnam film. In Full Metal Jacket, a little bit towards the end, there's some slightly human Vietnamese characters, but not really. They're victims and prostitutes. And in them. And in the Deer Hunter, the Deer Hunter, the Vietnamese are sort of depicted much as the Japanese tend to be depicted in World War II. They're terrifying, and they're only terrifying, and they're not depicted as humans in the same way as Americans are at all. It's just not there. It's not there in the genre.
Yeah, I mean, this is what people sometimes call macho victim status. The sort of the American view that isn't it hard on us? We went over
really
there
upsetting when you punch someone. It's just really upsetting.
And I think, and actually, this is why one of the reasons why actually the Raftery podcast series is quite interesting. It traces the narrative through this. This is the point at which in 86 is the point at which America was willing to say, do you know what, Vietnam was pretty unpleasant for Americans, and it will be a few more years before they're able to say, and also the Vietnamese.
By the way,
which brings us sort of to the casualty list.
High.
Anyone want to guess?
No, I mean, on the Vietnamese side, I would say almost literally countless.
Yeah,
and no one's making any attempt. On the American side, I'm gonna go out on a limb and say 60% of major characters die.
Something like I mean, the casualty list is between
depending on who you
160 to 233 is the range I could find online. Right. I very quickly stopped trying to count because it's tricky because and it actually, even at the end when the captain's on the radio and he gives the numbers, which I write them down. It's something like there's about 50 American casualties and there's about something like 500 Vietnamese casualties or so. They're not counting and they're not counted. And indeed the Vietnam War casualty list is quite one-sided. Cooler King Award for the most gratuitous American character. I mean,
I think it's easy. It's Barnes. Of course, it's Barnes.
Yeah.
I mean, he could not be from anywhere else. Except, I don't know, maybe German, not sure. No, he could be a Russian, I suppose, in a way, in a different sort of film. But he's such an American archetype, right?
Should we do Nastiest Nazi while we're here?
Also Barnes?
Yeah.
Also, I mean, all Bunny, but actually
Bunny.
Barnes.
I think Barnes edges him.
Yeah, Bunny is never going to run death camps.
No, but he's going to help. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. But you know, but Barnes has got the sort of Barnes. You feel is in a way the more worrying, the more frightening character because he's got that intelligence, and you know, Bunny's just a psychopath.
Although you know what, I mean, if you look at the lieutenant as well, whatever his name is, I can't remember his name. There's something quite, how to put it? There's something quite only obeying orders about him. You know, he sends people off to their deaths, and he knows it. He morally resigns from the whole situation, even though he's supposed to be responsible for it. And he's not beaten down. He's just sort of choosing not to. There's a real, I mean, if you ask this question in a very literal way about how most Nazi behaved, he's an extremely Nazi character.
Yes, that's fair, actually. Yeah, no, because he can see it, and he just decides to pretend that he hasn't seen
not
it.
My
and
problem.
He's not interested.
Yeah.
I don't care anymore. Yeah. Actually, yeah. Well, yeah. Let's get some the and introducing category.
Well, there's an obvious one here.
There is a very obvious one. Yeah,
Johnny Depp.
Johnny Depp.
Yeah.
Johnny Depp.
I've seen this so many times. I forget that Johnny Depp is in it.
Me too.
Me
too. Exactly. He looked very familiar when I watched this weekend. I had to go to the internet and check it was him. Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, he was heavily cut out, wasn't he? He was meant to be in it more, I believe.
I think possibly. And there was a documentary about making it called Brothers in Arms, the Platoon story or something, in which he features very heavily.
Yeah.
Very much by that stage, he has gone over to Camp Dope, I can reveal. I think he's actually rolling a cigarette during or something during the documentary. It's excellent. I mean, also, but there's loads of people who are in.
Well, Forrest Whitaker as well.
Forrest Whitaker, yeah.
I mean, the fact that it's only a year after this, Forrest Whitaker is going to be back in Vietnam in Good Morning Vietnam.
Yes,
which is probably the film that makes Forrest Whitaker.
I think so. And I saw Good Morning Vietnam in the cinema, and I think that's where I always think of Forrest Whitaker from. Except that in a weird way, then I've always just felt like he's always just been there because he's
of course he's in Vietnam.
I mean, there's also Dale Dye, whose career is made by this. But we've talked about him, and Warriors Inc., which is the company that he founds, is made by this. And after this, everyone says they have to have Dale Dye sort of advising him, but. I mean, also Charlie Sheen is only third billed in this film.
Really? That's fascinating. Well, can we say something about the tragedy of Charlie Sheen?
Yes.
Because Charlie Sheen in this film is, you see Charlie Sheen in this, and he's going to go on to be absolute Hollywood royalty, as good as it gets. Is he going to be Jack Nicholson? Is he going to be Mel Gibson? He's going to be huge. I dread to think I haven't checked the amount of time that passes between Charlie Sheen making Platoon and Charlie Sheen making Hot Shots Part 2, but it's a pretty bleak dive, that period of time. That's not who he's supposed to be.
I went through it yesterday, and actually, Hot Shots Part 1 is not bad.
But I mean, even Hot Shots Part 1, it's like Part 1. It's like, dude, you're better than that. This is not who you were meant to be. Yeah. No, and I think there's if you look through his film, there is a decline, and even the big films he's in, like the Rookie, they're not great films. I mean, it is the sad decline of Charlie Sheen that by sort of 1997, 1998, he's got a cameo in being John Malkovich as John Malkovich's best friend, which is just a huge joke by that point. That John Malkovich would be best friends with someone like Charlie Sheen.
Yeah.
So that which is not, again, if you've been hit on the head after seeing Platoon and sort of been woken up for being John Malkovich, you'd think, oh well, fair enough, they would be great friends because they're both tremendous actors.
But it's a genuine shame because you think, actually, if you take away Platoon, Charlie Sheen had a perfectly respectable career. Did well, some good films. Some films I liked. He's a funny comedy actor. He does it well.
Sustains 2 sitcoms.
Yeah, but you look at Platoon and the actor he could. Maybe he didn't want to be that actor. Who knows? But the actor he could have been when you look at Platoon, and you think, I don't know. I prefer the parallel history where he was where that wasn't him.
Yeah. Sort of, he's bought it, Sarge. the best death.
Oh, I'm so sorry, but can I have one more and introducing?
Go on. Yep.
Which is what's his name? John McGinley, John C. McGinley.
Oh yes, yeah.
He's another one of the sergeant. He's Sergeant O'Neill. Yeah. Later, best to be known as the janitor from Scrubs. But nonetheless,
yes.
There he is. There he is for the first time. Almost
is he
the
the
first
janitor
time.
Or is he? No, I thought he was another surgeon. He's in Scrubs anyway. He's
is he? No, you're right. He's not the janitor. He's the evil top.
Evil top.
Yes.
He's
the cynical surgeon.
Tremendous in this, and I hadn't realised this is a very early film role for him. And and it is actually. I mean, we have an occasional category for the Jesse Plemons Award for the actor who stole the film, but you could put him in that actually because it's a minor role, but he sticks in your mind.
Yeah, he does.
There's a lot of this film that I could quote, and there's a lot of this film that so I'd forgotten that Johnny Depp was in it, but the O'Neill character, his arc was completely familiar to me because everything, the sucking up, the hiding under the body, and the realization at the end of it that he's now in charge.
Yeah, he's now in charge and going back in, and it's not. Yeah,
oh no. Yeah. There's the brilliant, he really, he's for what he's got. I mean, he's probably in it a bit too much to say he stole the film as a mind, but he's given a small amount and he really runs with it.
Yeah.
He's bought it, Sarge, to the best death.
We're giving it to William Dafoe, aren't we?
We're giving it to
Of course,
William Dafoe.
I mean, it's not just the best death in this film. It's potentially the best death in a film. It's it's the poster. It's an icon. It's how you want to die in a film. God damn it! It's amazing. Yeah,
no, absolutely fantastic. A reach up to heaven, which was his sort of. He said, "Oh well, I was thinking, well, the helicopters are up there. That's what I'd be reaching to." But it's a little bit Christ-like. It's it's great stuff. And actually, that's along with Barber's Adagio for strings. Which, by the way, if you were a student in the 90s and you'd know about one person in 10 who had a CD, which for younger people is what we used to listen to music on, and they'd have a CD that had Barber's Adagio for strings, like, oh, it's the Platoon music, it's the Platoon music.
So, it's in that scene where he runs through the jungle, there's explosions, he's being shot at, he's doubled over, sort of holding himself. That ends with him, arms raised to heaven, to the helicopter. He's, I don't know if you probably know this, you probably read about this, but so he's holding, Defoe is holding the remote control that triggers the bombs. He's basically in charge of triggering the bombs as he runs past them. I guess because Oliver Stone reckoned if we do it from here, we're going to kill him. And you can see there's a point where obviously some of them haven't gone off. And as he's running, he just kind of sort of throws it away in disgust. And they left it in the film. You have to know it's there to spot it. Right, him hurling away the remote control and kind of like, fuck this, as he carries on running, which is a kind of like, I guess it's technically a blooper. But you just think it's some sort of military bit of equipment he's dropping. But once you know what it is, he's been triggering the bombs and he just chucks that as he goes.
No, all of that scene is amazing. And brings us to best meme, which is, there's not for a film that's so influential, I struggled with memes, except Willem Dafoe dying.
Yeah.
I mean...
Well, yes.
What have you got?
Obviously, as a sort of long-standing member, Rob, of the weed fraternity, you'll be deeply familiar with smoking weed down the barrel of a gun. But this is more or less where it comes from. That whole concept. I think that's, but also the meme of. Does it have to be a visual meme?
It doesn't have to be. No. I do. We'll take.
Well, the whole concept of the enemy was in us, which is almost with this film, it's almost a painful cliche. I'm not sure it was a painful cliche back in '86, and sometimes you see the success of whatever a pre-meme is, the success of a concept when it becomes cliche because it sort of spreads. And I think that kind of the enemy was in us all along. That's pervasive.
Yes. Yeah, I don't know whether it's invented, but no, it does become, again, you see, this is slightly why there's a part of me that feels like, oh, it's a bit, I thought that was smart when I was 17. Now I'm 51. I wonder whether that's really, but maybe I'm being unfair. I did think it was tremendously smart when I was 17. Stiffest upper lip.
Are there any?
I've got
it's
Berenger
not a very
again.
stiff upper lip movie, is it? I mean,
I think Sergeant Barnes, at the end, but just do it, But no, it's not a very stiff upper lip movie.
No, I think it's not. It's a bit too. It's too American for that. I would say.
Yeah. I mean, Elias doesn't have a stiff upper lip. I mean, actually, the one scene to mention your book again, the sort of the
Please.
no,
don't.
Okay, well, there is a scene in your book which it directly references this film, which is the moment where Elias comes out of the jungle and sees Barnes, and this is the other bit that's stuck in my mind. He sees Barnes and he smiles because he thinks I'm safe, and then Barnes shoots him, which is is sort of is referenced in your book, and there are bits of this that, even though in a way you sort of think, looking about it, why would you think you're safe? You're in Vietnam. You've told this guy you're going to get him court-martialed. You know, you're not safe alone with this is. But I think the film pulls it off. I mean, even sort of knowing it was coming, I sort of like, oh yeah, okay. I sort of believe that you would.
What?
Because you're Elias, and you just think Elias isn't going to shoot Barnes.
Well, and the smile of it as well. The way he's like kind of. It's sort of. It's funny, you know, we were talking before about him, the happy soldier running through the jungle. There's that sort of guilelessness to Elias. That although he's the philosopher warrior, there is that. It's inconceivable to him that this is going to happen to him there. And it is that moment where you just see both those characters, bang, this is who they are. Yeah.
Yeah. And almost in that moment, you think that Elias might say, do you know what? We'd all had a bit of a tough day that day. Let's forget you killing the maybe not. Dan Buster's dog prize for the most problematic moment.
Well, there's a lot on that.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot, but are there? I mean,
the fundamental one is the lack of Vietnamese perspective, isn't it? I mean, if you're making this today, you would not do that.
I think you could say, well, you know, there is language that we will not be repeating. There's quite a lot of that, but on the other hand, I sort of believe that Sergeant Barnes's character probably was a racist, you know, and the racist men from the South in the 70s probably used racist, or the 60s, in fact, probably used racist language, and I certainly believe that American soldiers used racist language about the Vietnamese, sort of, and I'm sure that I believe that soldiers, you know, talk about women in ways that they might not if their mothers were present, you know.
But I mean, this is the kind of film it is. You know, if Oliver Stone at this point were making Dam Busters, a lot of it would be basically around the lines of, "Hey guys, guess what they called the dog?" You know what I mean? It was like, it's not passing unnoticed. It's the point. Yeah.
No, so I think all of that is fine. I think that Duncan's right. The more problematic thing is the thing we've touched on of just like, you know, the Vietnamese were people too. Loose lips, best lines.
Opinions are like assholes. Everyone's got one.
Excuses like assholes.
Excuses like assholes. Everyone's got one. Forgive me.
We could use that at work tomorrow.
Yeah.
I like I am reality.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You know, I am reality. I just think that scene is great. Broadsword Radio. I don't have any completely implausible moments. I've heard it said that Charlie Sheen's hair is wrong. That
well, I mean,
it feels, but it's that thing, isn't it? I'm sure, you know, because it's sort of semi-autobiographical, you know, none of it feels completely unreasonable. It all feels like a plausible experience someone could have had.
I mean, I think Barnes, I mean, you mentioned it before, and it is good. It is good that it's there. But Barnes kind of striding through the jungle while everyone else is cowering under cover, and he's just like too pissed off to get hit by shrapnel, is kind of a bit that, you know, it's like, I mean, however sort of self-assured and confident and frightening you are, people, you know, the Viet Cong don't know not to shoot you because of that. You know what I mean? It's like, it's like you really can't sort of deflect the bullets by the force of your will. And that's a little bit sort of too cartoony and indulged, I would say. But I'll allow it.
Yeah. But I think a judgment at Nuremberg. I mean,
definitely some more.
There are events.
There are events, and it's a big plot point.
Duncan, is this the operation that changed the course of the Vietnam War?
Rob, viewers will be interested to know. Rob WhatsApped me today and said, "I have some questions about, you know, what this platoon was trying to achieve." And I think my reply was to say, I think many US soldiers and Marines in Vietnam had many questions about what precisely this was all going to achieve. But there is an interesting point here, I think, which is that cinematically, most of what we get about the Vietnam War made by Hollywood is about Marines and soldiers, GIs, you know, trouncing off through the jungle and patrolling villages and getting ambushed and setting up ambushes and all of that. The US never expected to win the war in Vietnam. through that. US strategy for very, very early on, you've got a counterinsurgency program. They abandon that quite quickly, all this hearts and minds stuff. The US thinks it is going to win the war in Vietnam through bombing the North. I mean, that's fundamentally the strategy. We're going to keep bombing them. The assumption is the entire insurgency in the South is fundamentally controlled by Hanoi. If we bomb them enough, they will stop. And the US soldiers and Marines that are in the South are about holding off defeat in the South whilst the war is won by bombing. The war isn't won by bombing because they fundamentally misunderstand how Hanoi sees the situation. And the soldiers in the South that all these films are about, what they're doing is never going to win the war. It's about prolonging the regime in Saigon, which ultimately doesn't work. Yeah, I mean, you could make a film about, bombing the North. It would be quite a strange film.
Well, I mean, so having said that, I agree with you entirely, but having said I just came back from Vietnam. In my, sort of Western chauvinistic ignorance, I'd never really thought about the Vietnam perspective of being bombed in the North because my understanding of Vietnam is through films like this very much based around what happened in the South. And you're kind of like, hey, the war didn't really touch the North. And it's like, well, of course it did. They got bombed, I mean, literally you had whoever it was saying you wanted to bomb them back to the Stone Age. I forget which general it was. Yeah. And going to the museum in Hanoi, they understand the American pilots, of whom John McCain was one, regarded in America to this day as a hero. And I'm not going to dispute that. He went through terrible things. He was tortured. He didn't give up information. He could have given up all that kind of stuff. But they still regard those pilots much like we would regard the German pilots of the Blitz, or the Germans would regard the pilots of Dresden.
Air pirates is what they call them, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, they are depicted as war criminals who were nonetheless treated surprisingly humanely by the North Vietnamese. And I mean, parts of that you can quibble with, obviously, but the fundamental understanding of these people were inflicting something terrible on them. Yeah, I mean. Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, just to give you some number, I can because we've plugged Hugo's book. I'm going to hold up my own. Blood and Treasure. There's a bit on Vietnam. Just to give the stats, I had to look them up. Between 1964 and 1973, the U.S. Air Force dropped 6.1 million tons of bombs on Vietnam and also Laos and Cambodia. The U.S. Navy and Marine Corps added another 1.5 million tons. So to put that in context, that's 3 times as much bombing as the United States carried out in the European and Asian theatres of the Second World War combined. It is a lot. It's about the stat, which some economic historians like, which I think is an interesting way of thinking about it, is that's approximately 100 kilos of explosives for every person in Vietnam. The most any country has ever been bombed ever.
I remember reading in the 80s that one of the main Vietnamese exports was now scrap metal from those bombs back to America to make cars. Right. Okay.
Yeah. Well, I mean, within Vietnam, you can see the legacy of a lot of the war just in a sort of nature and geographical way. To this day, you can see, you go to cave, you go to sort of like prehistoric caves where the entrances have been bombed in because the Viet Cong used to keep stuff in them and the Americans bombed them when they flew over. There are bits of jungle that ought to be forest, but because they were flattened and burnt, they grew back as jungle. You got in neighboring Cambodia, which of course they bombed to hell as well. You look at everything. I mean, you look at Vietnam is a sort of remarkably functional country. Became a remarkably functional country really quite quickly, considering the extent to which it was having to balance the competing ambitions of the US, China, and Russia all the way through. Cambodia spent decades as a basket case, is still a borderline dysfunctional country. I think something like a third of its GDP today comes from basically scam farms that are hidden in the jungle. That is precisely where they were fighting towards the end of Platoon when they crossed the border. The rule of law runs pretty thin in Cambodia, and the history of the Khmer Rouge and Pol Pot and all that kind of stuff. All that is the legacy of the Vietnam War. Of course it is. While I was there just a couple of weeks ago, Cambodia and Thailand briefly went to war over a border skirmish, which itself is the legacy of the Khmer Rouge, which itself is the legacy of the Vietnam War. Yeah. So, I mean, you kind of, and this is a long time ago now. This is half a century ago. So, I mean, you've got to, it's not sort of done and dusted. It's not done and dusted when Charlie Sheen gets on the helicopter and goes home, I guess.
Worth dying for. How does this film stand up? Hugo? I mean, you've given us your answer.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, like, it's not a film I can watch frequently. It is a film that when it's on TV, I find hard to turn off because there are various beats I'm waiting for. I think it's a classic of the genre and may in time be remembered as the classic of the genre, simply because, as I said at the beginning, our understanding of the Vietnam War increasingly, I think, is closer to the model shown in Platoon than it is in some of those arguably cinematically greater films that came before.
Duncan.
First time I've watched it in 20 years. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Will not wait another 2 decades to watch it again. It's a great film.
Yeah. Yeah, I couldn't get my family to watch it with me. I had to watch it with headphones and slightly disapproving noises from various teenagers, which is a shame, actually, because I sort of hoped that one of the teenagers would watch it with me, because I sort of think, it's quite, as I say, I think it probably is a film best enjoyed when you're 16. Possibly it's a film best enjoyed when you're 16, not with your father. But no, it is, there is, even with my quibbles about it, I have quibbles about whether sort of the voiceover and as I say, it's all slightly adolescent and narcissistic at times, and that may just be who Oliver Stone is. It's such a tight film. It goes from thing to thing to thing. Once you're in, much like Vietnam, you don't want to get out. You can't get out until the end. And it is an amazing. It's an amazing early film. So thank you very much, Hugo, for recommending it, for suggesting it.
What a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you as ever, Duncan.
Thank you, Rob, and thank you to everyone who listened.
Thanks for listening.